what's the secret sauce, what makes it work. And it's the community. We've got wonderful leaders in this community that aren't ego-driven, that just want to get shit done. And we've got this amazing collaboration between government and software industry, as well as clinicians. And it's open for anyone to join. Hello and welcome to Pulse, your podcast delving into all things health, innovation, digital and data. Proudly brought to you by Pulse+IT News. I'm your host, Louise Shaper.
And I'm your other host, George Margellis.
Now, George, I'm going to start the show with an apology. I want to personally apologise to Pulse Potties and to you, George, because this episode is out of sync with our regularly scheduled programming, and that's completely on me. Life just caught up to me. And last week, I just could literally, I was getting bare minimum sleep, and I couldn't get through everything. And so, unfortunately, I was behind on the podcast, but back on schedule now. But my apologies to everyone if you were worried about what happened to George and I on a Friday morning and we weren't in your feed.
I guess you, Louise, like everyone else, are subject to the same 24-hour limit per day as our world goes around the sun. I think most of the people that are listening will definitely forgive you, and I'm sure find some other way to amuse themselves this Friday. But 2026 is coming up, so there's a lot more to learn, so keep tuned.
Yes, there is. And George, did you see there's some people have been sharing their Spotify Wrapped online and with us personally, and some people have shared where we are number 1 or number 2, the Pulse Pod, in their listening habits. The first one I saw, it was late on a Friday night as I was going to bed looking at my phone, which you're not supposed to do, people, but anyway, I'm human, so I was doing that. And it just put me in such a good mood. I was like, oh, it's just so lovely. So thanks, everybody.
Yep, I had a few people noted to me as well that we're on their Spotify list. I never thought I'd become a Spotify star, but yeah, it's good to see. So keep on listening. I guess the important thing is that we're continuously providing you information. The more you listen, the more you learn.
Yes, that's right. So thanks, everybody. It's a great Christmas present to George and I to know so many of you not just tune into the show, but you get value out of it and you're part of the community. And we just love doing this. So thank you so much. Everyone's doing a Wrapped this year, George. LinkedIn has done a Wrapped. Have you seen?
I saw that yesterday, actually.
Yeah. So I'm holding it up. No one else can see it. But on my LinkedIn Wrapped, I've got my year in review, and it's like the person you kept up with all year long. And it's got you and me together, George.
Linked at the hip, as they would say. And look, I have to say, Louise, it's been a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to many more years of linking in with you on LinkedIn's wrap-up.
That will be really cool. Yes. George, so this episode is dropping a few days before Christmas. So what's happening with Christmas? Because you've got all these Greek traditions and I'm trying to be a good friend. So I thought, I'll actually Google what's a Greek Christmas? Like, what are the traditions? And so I went down an internet rabbit hole for a while there about how the Greeks in the 1920s switched from Julian calendar to the Gregorian. But now apparently Greeks use the Gregorian calendar for Christmas. So it's still the 25th, but you use the Julian calendar for Easter.
Depending on the sect within the Greek Orthodox religion and the various other Orthodox religions, so Orthodox religions do celebrate Christmas either on the 25th of December, and my family has always celebrated on the 25th of December, but many others celebrate it in the middle of January, and friends and family that we have also celebrate it then. So we actually do get to have Christmas, New Year, and Christmas again, which is why you often find us about 5 kilos heavier by the end of January.
Oh, brilliant. You've got all the family. And Evie's older now. So do you reckon she's old enough to get Christmas now?
We have all committed to making sure Evie gets a present this year. She did have her Santa photos taken today, which were an interesting experience. Danny sent me a photo of Evie screaming her little heart out on Santa Claus's lap. My plans for dressing for Santa Claus on Christmas have now been thwarted. I won't be doing that, but we're looking forward to it. The family's all coming around and it should be a fun time. Here in Sydney, Christmas is a little bit more somber this year after the recent episode of the massacre at Bondi Beach. Bondi Beach is literally 2 beaches up the road from me, so it's really close to home. Look, thoughts and prayers go out to all of those who are affected, not just the 15 people who passed away, but the 1,000 people who are down the beach. The reality is everyone in Sydney is still in shock. So I think our Christmas will be a little quieter. We will be all saying a quiet prayer for those who aren't here for the festive season. And hopefully something like this can never happen again in Australia, and something will happen to make sure that it never does happen again.
Yeah, so tragic. And thanks everyone for all the best wishes. We've got so many listeners from overseas who have contacted George, and even myself. I don't even live in Sydney. It's somber for everybody in Australia, and that's an understatement to actually be so close, let alone for the people who were actually the target. I couldn't imagine. It's just horrific. And glad to hear that our gun laws, which are so strong, are going to be tightened even more now in New South Wales, and then the rest of the country will follow.
And the reality is gun laws are a public health issue that we really need to focus on. Those of us old enough to remember the Port Martha massacre will know that we did some massive changes then. But as I was saying today, complacency has slept in, and sometimes we need to rethink the way our systems currently work.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, George. And thanks for those nice words. So, yes, thoughts with everybody impacted by those terror attacks in Sydney. All right. Well, George, we have got a different format today, a little bit different. So, this is a special end of year Pulse episode, which is designed to complement Pulse+IT's annual year in review stories. So, to close out every year, Pulse+IT produces really cool year in review series. And this episode focuses on the first two in the 2025 series, which are the key goings on and themes in Australian and New Zealand digital health. George, I just love that Pulse+IT have been doing these review pieces for so many years. I find they're really good, valuable resources. When I used to have young people or just people who hadn't worked in healthcare before start working for me, that was part of their induction. I'd give them the last couple of years of the year in reviews for Pulse+IT so that they could start learning the language, the big themes, what's going on in our sector here in Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, they've been one of my favorites over the years as well. I look forward to those end of year reviews about what happened in the year. And then it allows you to put into context how busy we are in this space. So even though we got cough and complain about the slow pace of change, when we look at what happens in a year, you realize that there's so much happening in parallel that we need to get our heads around and take that into the next stage of deliverables. So it's an exciting time. I'm looking forward to going through the various reviews.
All right, well, let's get cracking then. Now, no surprise, George, our first segment is on AI going mainstream. So in 2025, artificial intelligence fundamentally transformed every part of digital health. It's natural starting ground, I guess, especially for a technology that is set to transform healthcare and our health ecosystem at scale. So not only were we hard pressed not to have an episode of the show where we didn't talk about AI, we managed a couple episodes, I think, but AI is everywhere. But AI also earned a dedicated channel in Pulse+IT because it became embedded in new product releases, routine software upgrades, standard procurement cycles, and others. And so we really saw AI transforming areas like imaging analysis, coding support, scheduling, research, triage, and of course, ambient clinical documentation. We've seen the software industry actively positioning AI less as an innovation and more as an expected layer within clinical and corporate systems. And of course, this trend was global. Australia and New Zealand were not immune. Now, over in New Zealand, a survey showed the private sector demonstrated continued uptake of AI-enabled tools, especially for administrative tasks like note-taking scribes. And also in New Zealand, the Australian-founded AI scribe company Heidi was rolled out nationwide to all New Zealand emergency departments. However, the effective uptake of AI is ultimately going to rely on developing a strong data culture, which was called out by Stefan Buttigieg from the European Public Health Association and quoted by Pulse+IT. In the mainstream press, we are ending the year on constant talk of an AI bubble and when it might burst and what that would mean. And we continue to be surrounded by a lot of hype. So, George, let's talk about what this mainstream shift means for care delivery.
I don't know what we would have talked about this year if we hadn't been for AI, Louise. It encompassed pretty much everything we discussed. And I was often very tempted to put our stories into AI and ask it to remove the AI so we could have something to talk about. But it's an important event. It's only, 3 years since the launch of ChatGPT, and already we're seeing a plethora of AI tools out there. It's been yet another year of AI on steroids, following 2 previous years of AI on steroids. And we've all been sitting around, as you noted, talking about the bubble. And there was some discussion around about November when NVIDIA was about to release its latest results, whether the bubble was ready to burst. The results came back even bigger and brighter than expected. So the bubble's getting bigger and bigger. And we have to question whether is it really a bubble or is it a very solid structure that we're resting on? AI has its pros and cons. Sometimes the AI is shoved into something where it doesn't need to be, but there have seen also lots of examples of AI tools that make a big difference. And we need to better understand what the implications are. My biggest problem has been that it's really hard now differentiating one solution from another because they all seem to blur into this combined diagnostic, descriptive, therapeutic guideline blob that does everything. And the idea of having focused AI solutions is being overtaken by a much more general AI type model. We've seen some shining examples of stuff that work. We've seen some great examples of stuff that don't work. I did love it. If you saw the Russian robots that didn't quite make onto stage, they seem to have their algorithms miscalculated. But we've also seen some examples of hallucinations and made up references. So we're still seeing some of those core examples of what's wrong with AI, which takes us back to that. I think that Stefan Buttigieg quote is the quote of the year. Rethink your priorities and start from the level of data culture. It's only then that we can really unlock the promise of AI for public health. I mean, 40 years ago when I did my first computer science subject, garbage in, garbage out was the saying. I think Stefan put it much more eloquently. Bad data in, bad outcomes out. So I think we need to think about that. We're still trying to find that nirvana. So we have seen administrative advantages. You touched on those. Beginning of the year, we were told that AI scribes were going to make all the doctors' lives better. By the end of the year, we saw articles published in major journals suggesting that the productivity gains aren't as great as have been claimed. However, the doctors all seem to be happier, which is a good thing. The big players in town are coming in, be it Oracle and Epic and everyone else. InterSystems have all got an AI component to their solutions. So we are going into uncharted territory where everything is based on AI, but AI is not necessarily based on a solid basis. Hopefully we can solidify the basis in 2026 and really start to get some of the value out of the AI discussions we're having.
Yeah. I really wanted to pick up that comment about the data foundation layer because it's so critical, but these are not really technology problems. So how do you actually change the culture to a data embedded culture where there are still hospitals that can't agree on a standard discharge form? And if they actually thought about it from a data perspective and a patient first perspective, it would be easy to agree what goes on a discharge form. There seems to be this disconnect between, AI and clinicians, for the most part, actually a little bit scared, but a little bit excited as well. They're looking forward to what this technology can mean for them and their ability to practice care. But how do we actually change a workforce culture that has actually, to be honest, resisted change? Because we're taught at university to capture information in a certain way. For what purpose? For the purpose of me, as the clinician, providing care to the person sitting right in front of me. We're not thinking, how could other people in the clinical care team make use of this data? What would be useful for the patient, let alone what would be useful at a system and public health issue and how AI would need good quality data? Do you see a solution there?
No simple solution, but I think you touched on it very early. You talked about our training as a university or as we go through the system. The education needs to focus on the systemic effect of what we're doing, not just the individual effect. And that's mind shift because from Hippocrates' day, we're taught to think about the doctor-patient relationship or the clinician-patient relationship. But when we talk about the public health component of this or the human component, it really needs to think about how it affects everybody. And the reality is bad data affects us and leads to us making bad decisions. So how do we make sure that the data that we're making decisions upon is accurate, up to date, standardized, interoperable so that irrespective of what solution we're using, we can still use the same data? I think it's almost like a digital maturity of the workforce. And that requires us to work on that from early days. Now, as digital natives start to embed themselves into the system, there may be a change there, but let's be honest, even digital natives aren't taught data standards. They're taught interface standards, but not data standards. So we need to start thinking about this more effectively and more efficiently. And that's where we have those organizations where we have clinicians and engineers and standards people and artistic people and interface people all involved in these discussions.
That's right. I look forward to seeing, and would be talking about it on the pod in next year, what organisations and countries do about this cultural aspect around the criticality of data. So that'll be really interesting. And also wonder what will happen in 2026, where AI scribes, we've talked about it a lot on the pod, but they're almost like the gateway drug to AI. Like people love them. And is that going to be the gateway drug for more AI related technologies embedded into clinical care, and the expectation from clinicians as well as from patients that they will be?
Our good friend Greg Moran's been doing some interesting work around the digital maturity, in particular in the aged care sector lately, and understanding that the sector needs to have a level of maturity to be able to have these sort of robust discussions around things like data. And sometimes it means level setting everyone at a certain level. And some people are going to have to come up to that standard. Some people are going to have to work their way to understand what the challenges are at the coalface. So it's a continuing journey.
Yeah. That wraps up our commentary. Let's move to the next segment where we're going to focus on modernisation, standards, and the path to integration. So moving on here, 2025 saw significant, although sometimes divergent, progress in infrastructure and strategic planning across Australia and New Zealand. So in Australia, as reported in Pulse+IT, we really saw a steady progression. So we've got more digital hospital programs, virtual models advancing. They seem to be going as planned. Programs have progressed through phased rollouts, so research platforms, electronic patient record upgrades, more people are using the My Health record, pathology replacement programs, and so on. And in both Australia and New Zealand, I reckon it's just really great that we've seen virtual care start to be established and stabilised as mature models in healthcare. It's a far from universally offered option, yes, but it is starting to really mature. And New Zealand launched a new national 24/7 digital health service, and 1-800 Medicare, which we talked about on the show a few months back, that's kicking off in January 2026. And then moving on from virtual care, Australia continued to kick ass on standards and interoperability thanks to the work of the Spark program. This work just keeps getting better and better, and there is international interest in learning what's the secret to this fantastic collaboration between government, industry, and clinicians. So it's so cool to see Australia leading global efforts to produce data sharing resources that are going to underpin how the health system shares information between clinical systems. Of course, all based around the FHIR standard, which was invented here in Australia. Hats off to you, Graham Grieve. And meanwhile, in New Zealand, they spent much of 2025 trying to reset their digital direction after pretty much a bruising couple of years. But the year culminated with the long-awaited launch of the Health Digital Investment Plan, which we discussed on our last show. This plan sets a new long-term direction, including future projects such as a single electronic medical record system across the health sector. And as reported by Pulse+IT, Health New Zealand Chair Lester Levy called the plan a landmark moment for a system facing a massive technical and data deficit. But the plan, of course, came into criticism, especially since it's called the Digital Health Investment Plan, because of the lack of investment. The New Zealand Auditor General, as well as many other people, commented that the implementation pathways are needed. We need clear assumptions about the health needs and the costs, of course. And the system itself has been acknowledged as remaining complex, fragmented, and fragile. So ultimately, New Zealand ended the year going, okay, this sounds good, but show me the money, government. And we will see what their budget has to say about that next year. So lots to unpack there, George. Where do you want to start?
Let's start off with telehealth, which is obviously an exciting area and an area that I've been involved in for many years. And there was an article many years ago which said that innovations in healthcare took 17 years. Yeah, I remember demonstrating some telehealth solutions at HIC back in the early 2010s. So maybe not 17 years, but getting close to that. But we are heading in the right direction. And we did see that big blip when COVID, when everything turned to telehealth, and then we saw the subsequent dip. But now we're starting to see that reprioritization. There are some challenging aspects to it. We are starting to see some get-rich-quick type telehealth schemes popping up, selling specific drugs into the market, and that's short-circuiting the traditional primary care model. And personally, I'm not a big fan of that, but I think it also does reflect that the primary care system is under a lot of stress and just isn't capable of delivering on its full promise. So we need to work at that balance. Some of that balance is payment, some of that balance is governance, some of that balance is just having a system in place that, is designed to optimize outcomes rather than just manage transactions. 1-800 Medicare, looking forward to its role in improving the overall system, relieving some of that stress so that primary care can go back to doing what it does well, which is help support people throughout their lifespan. But we need to take these technologies, implement them at a scalable way, and provide them in a format that organizations can use more effectively. So I think we're getting there. It's been a fun journey. We're definitely moving forward. Are we moving forward as fast as I would like? Well, probably not, but then it sure beats moving backwards.
Are you seeing more virtual care in aged care?
We have seen a little bit of it come in with the adoption of the new Act. So as the new clinical requirements are coming into the aged care system with the new Act, we have seen some innovative uses of telehealth. Unfortunately, we did see a bit of a chicken and egg thing. So we did see investments in technology before we saw investments in new workflows. So we did have a bit of a disconnect, but it's starting to equilibrate now. And we're starting to see some innovative clinicians using the technology that's available in innovative ways outside of the scope of what they were originally designed to do. I'm hopeful in 2026 we will see some interesting examples of that. And again, plug in for ITAC 2026 in May in Brisbane, where we'll be able to demonstrate some of those opportunities.
Yeah, great.
So as far as standards go, Australia has taken the lead again in standards, even though it was a decade after we invented fire and then decided to take it back up again as a de facto standard. Great work there from the Spark team. I think we're progressing forward. We are starting to see it become the de facto standard, and even our friends across the ditch are looking at it. So I think we're headed in the right direction there.
And I mentioned in my intro on that story about what's the secret sauce. So if you're not from Australia and you're not across Sparked, I can tell you it's very easy what's the secret sauce, what makes it work. And it's the community. We've got wonderful leaders in this community that aren't ego-driven, that just want to get shit done. And we've got this amazing collaboration between government and software industry, as well as clinicians. And it's open for anyone to join. And I noticed, which Pulse+IT put in their piece as well, that Health Minister Mark Butler mentioned Sparked in an address he gave earlier this year. And in that address, he said that there's been over 21,000 hours of in-kind time just in the first 2 years of the Spark program. Like, you're only going to put in those hours, not just because the work is valuable, but because you like the people that you're working with and knowing that you're changing healthcare. It's just amazing. So I want to see more Sparked, more global Sparked as well.
Absolutely. I remember attending a HIMSS event in the US 10, 12 years ago where fire was the rage. And again, they all knew Graham Grieve better than many Australians knew Graham Grieve. So I think we've taken us a while to get there, but slow and steady wins the race, and we have gotten to the stage where we have a ongoing involvement across the entire sector. Kudos to the government people who are supporting this. They've done a great job in bringing it to mind. Emma Hossack did point out, but we do still need to make sure that we have resources to make it sustainable.
Absolutely.
You can only do so much on excitement and enthusiasm. You still need some sustainable models behind it. But once the system's working, the efficiencies will gain should more than enough pay for the costs associated with making the standards.
Yeah, and I would hope as well that the Australian companies, the software companies that are involved in Spark, they're doing a huge amount of work on this, but I would hope that actually makes them more competitive on a global market as well, because they'll be able to talk to any other systems that a particular healthcare service may have already had. So I'm hoping that it also helps Australian innovation as well.
Absolutely.
And what about our friends in New Zealand?
So our friends in New Zealand, I've given them a pretty hard time over the year because I've complained that a couple of years ago they stole some of our best people and locked them away in Auckland and didn't let them do stuff here in Australia and then threw them back out into the scrap heaps. Hopefully this time they'll be able to deliver on some of their promises. If they keep a good eye on what's happening here in Australia, they've got a lot to learn. Hopefully they won't try to poach our people again, but maybe we can work out some way to collaborate more effectively. But I think they need to focus on what you pointed out, Yobi. You can have a great plan, you can have a great document, unless you follow it up with the resources to deliver on it. An implementation plan which is doable, properly resourced, and properly communicated, you can't deliver on it. And now the reality is health technology shouldn't be a political play. It should be a societal play. And I think they're slowly learning from their mistakes. And look, the reality is there's only so many dollars they have to spend. And these things need to be done in a way that's financially sustainable, culturally sustainable, and demonstrates benefit, because there's nothing more frustrating than throwing a lot of money at a problem and not seeing a positive end result.
Absolutely. I like to say that it's not just our common passions that join us together in digital health, it's often our common frustrations as well. All right. Well, time for a quick break, George. Don't go anywhere, everyone. We will be back shortly with our final segment for the episode. Welcome back, everybody, for our final segment where we're breaking down the Pulse+IT year in review, the first 2 articles in that series, which focus on Australia and New Zealand. So in our final segment here, we are going to be talking about risk, governance, and its relationship to innovation. And I promise you, it's not as boring as it sounds. Like, this thing's very important. All right. Now, our final segment addresses the critical undercurrent which shapes all digital innovation, which is risk. So for both countries, firstly, cybersecurity and privacy remained fundamental concerns. The threat landscape continued to dictate digital health investment and program design. Pulse+IT highlighted a survey which found that many organisations, and I can't believe this is still happening, many organisations remain unprepared for ransomware, reinforcing the need for stronger governance, security testing, and resilience as systems become increasingly interconnected. Cybersecurity did become an implicit foundation for every digital health program, or did it? I don't know. We'll talk about it, George, in a second. But I'm like, come on, people, can't we get our shit together? We know that this thing is real and it's a problem and it's more sophisticated. AI is even going to make it worse. So let's do something about it. But beyond conventional cybersecurity threats, AI introduced new concerns as well, tying into those cyber and privacy requirements. So a lot of discussions this year on data provenance, model transparency, i.e., most of them don't have any, and responsible use. Analysis continued to highlight the security gaps remain the biggest risk for AI in healthcare. And now the need for robust governance also extends into cutting-edge fields like precision health and genomics, which are now being embedded into routine care. Most of you aren't going to see that yet, but it is happening. It's very exciting. So Australia launched Genomics Australia, and they released a draft National Health Genomics Policy Framework, with one expert warning, though, that healthcare systems in Australia and New Zealand are currently just not prepared for the questions raised by the convergence of AI, public health, and personalised medicine, nor the strategic and tactical overhaul it demands. And I'd add in workforce challenges there. But one other risk which I wanted to add to this mix, which I just don't think we talk about enough, and I wanted to talk about it a lot in 2026, George, and see what we can do to move the needle here. So when we talk about risk, yes, cybersecurity comes up. There's economic risk, reputational risk, there's a whole bunch of them. But one of the things we don't talk about enough in the healthcare sector, which is we are not well set up to be innovative, which I think needs to be reframed as a risk in itself. It means that brilliant ideas, products, and changes to models of care offered by startups that are often led by clinicians themselves who have a deep understanding of the problem and they've come up with some super smart way to address those problems, they just can't get a foothold in the sector, or it's really difficult. And if we can't innovate, then the status quo persists and then nobody wins, least of all patients and the clinicians that support them. So again, lots to unpack there, George. So what would you like to comment on first?
First of all, risk and innovation are terms at opposite ends of the linguistic spectrum. They appear totally disconnected. Innovation implies risk. Avoiding risk implies avoiding any change. So we need to sort of work out how we balance that, keeping in mind that we are a very risk-averse industry because of the potential harm that can be caused by that. And the way we've done this in the past is the old more pilots and quantists type model. Let's do a little pilot, test it, demonstrate that it does something, but then realize that the demonstration we have doesn't scale out, so therefore we'll just park it away and maybe think about it further down the track. I think we really need to come into understanding and how clinicians and people actively involved in healthcare can play a greater role in innovation. And we've seen some shining examples, some of the work you guys have been doing down in Victoria, of clinicians playing a much more active role. But getting beyond that pilot stage or that minimum viable product stage into production remains the challenge. And that requires us to have organizations that have the capability to do that innovation with the required guardrails. Because if we do this without guardrails, we're going to have challenges. We're going to need to have surveillance in place to make sure things are heading in the right direction. But without the innovation, we're just going to run out of new ways of doing things. And we know, we've seen in healthcare that continuously using the same drug means that people become adapted to it. Continuing to use the same techniques lead to all sorts of challenges. So I think it's important. The key here is this is where AI may well play an important role. It enables us to iterate more rapidly and be able to pick up on both positive and negative outcomes faster so that we can guide ourselves down that sort of bumpy path of innovation going forward. So AI will play an important role, but we also need to keep into account that there are a number of other headwinds. We have non-standard data, we have fragmented payment systems, we have non-aligned workflows. So there's all those cultural issues that we need to work on as well. What's the old story? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I guess the challenge here is working out where that first bite is going to be.
An excellent point, George. Now, I think it starts with standards. Because I agree with you, like everyone thinks, oh, risk and innovation, opposite sides. As someone who works with a lot of people in the innovation space, and you and I, George, have done a lot of entrepreneurial stuff ourselves, like, yes, you can be innovative and not give a shit about risk, but you're not going to win, especially in healthcare. You're not going to go anywhere. And because people will realize that very quickly. But if you want to be a successful innovator in healthcare, literally it starts with risk. Usually, and most of the clinicians that I work with, usually the thing that they're trying to fix is a risk that they've identified, which causes a patient safety issue, either directly or indirectly, and clinician burnout as well. So they're trying to improve things for patients and improve things for clinicians. So you start with that risk analysis first, just to even identify the problems you want to solve. And then when you look at all the different ways of, okay, how can I cut this and work out a way of addressing these risks, that's when the innovation comes into fore. I think they're really actually perfectly aligned. And I want to see what we can talk about on Pulse to try and shift the dial in people's thinking about risk and innovation as not being at opposite ends, but actually being intricately intertwined, at least if we want to be successful in healthcare.
Absolutely. And I think, of course, when we talk about risk, we also need to talk about benefits. So what are the benefits of us doing something differently? And we know that whilst we have a relatively good healthcare system now, there is huge scope for improvement. We've talked a lot about how we've managed to increase lifespan in Australia, but we still have the challenge of up to 12 years of poor quality of life at that end of life. So again, the opportunity to do some risky things in that space, providing people with a choice about willing to take those risks if it's going to potentially improve their health span and improve their quality of life. I think we've been so laser focused on minimizing mortality that we've forgotten that health encompasses much more than just the number of years you live.
Yeah, yeah. And then back to your point of where do we start? See, that's where I think it starts with standards, because to avoid risk when you're being innovative, you want to make sure that when I collect a piece of data, or my software system does, and it shares it with another system, that it knows what it's talking about. There's no room for error there. So that starts with standards. So that's one thing. And then also procurement. I want to revisit in 2026. We introduced it earlier in this year, the UK's model. Maybe we can get someone to come and talk about it with us. But the UK actually changed their procurement models in 2025 to actually enable safe spaces. And so did Dubai, safe spaces for people outside of healthcare as well as inside of it, to actually introduce innovative ideas into healthcare and to manage the risk as an inherent part of that procurement process. And yes, like you said, moving from pilots to business as usual, because the status quo at the moment, the only thing that really wins is bureaucracy, which no one likes anyway, even the people doing the bureaucratic work. So I think we can do better in this regard. And I want to see more of that in 2026.
We will also need to be very clear about what our current outcomes are and how they can be improved. So whilst we tend to think that what we're doing now is the best gold standard practice, we've seen many examples where we've had suboptimal outcomes from existing systems, and we accept that as the norm. So raising the bar on what is acceptable standards, including dignity of risk for people who are willing to take those risks, and demonstrate in real time, in a very transparent way, benefits of what the innovations are so that people can adapt them more effectively, more efficiently.
Absolutely. So, George, I think we've come to an end of those 3 segments. What did you think the real story here? What's an ongoing theme that comes to mind across the things that were reported in those 2 Australian and New Zealand wrap-up articles?
Look, I think the key thing there was that now we are moving forward. Progress is probably not as fast as what we'd wish, but within the constraints of what we have around risk and resources, we're doing a fairly good job. AI has a lot of potential. We just need to separate the hype from the reality and deliver on it. The need for people who are actually in the system to play a much more active role in the innovation and reform is critical. And I think we also all focus back down on the fact that we need to have set standards to start with. Those standards may evolve, but we need to start off with some standards so that we're all on the same page as we go forward.
Yeah, 100% agree. It really is about these digital foundations. So whether that's workforce, policy conditions, we didn't even mention the amazing legislation went through in Australia this year. You know, we've got the share by default in Australia and the genomics legislation as well. So insurers are not allowed to say, sorry, we're going to adjust your premiums because you've had a genomic test. Like the policy is important. Workforce is important. We talk about that a lot on the show. Standards, data, these capabilities, these foundations are just critical. And I'm so grateful to the literally thousands of people, if not tens of thousands of people in Australia and New Zealand that are really working really hard, often behind the scenes, to make all this stuff be there, so to support the transformation of healthcare.
Absolutely. Looking forward to 2026. I think we'll have a lot more of new and exciting things to talk about. We have seen some major legislative changes this year, which have provided us with a new backbone upon which we can drive some of this innovation. Share by default is a great example of data becoming into the hands of all individuals. We've had a couple of discussions over the year around patient involvement and the AI used by patients. I think we're going to see a shake-up. So the best way for people to keep on track is to listen to Pulse podcast every week in 2026.
That's right. We will continue to come at you weekly because it's a lot more work, I must say. But we've been getting fabulous feedback from all of you. You love the weekly drops. So George and I are committed to continue that, and we will resume our normal regular programming straight after the new year. So firstly, if you want to dive deeper on any of the stories that we've covered today and you want to do a catch up, have a look at our show notes. We have put links to the Pulse+IT Year in Review series there. And I want to congratulate Pulse+IT team on yet another excellent year of digital health journalism. They've got new content every single day. You wouldn't think there's so much going on. And there's a really small team of dedicated journalists that write this stuff, and they're just fantastic. Just a shout out to them. Now, also wanted to say that the next episode of the show is going to drop next week after Christmas, and we're going to focus on the final 2 articles in the Year in Review series. And so, George, until I see you soon, enjoy your Christmas. And I know it will be a bit more somber in Sydney, and rightfully so, but I hope you still have lots of time with the lovely family. And of course, getting Evie to experience her first Christmas that she might remember.
Thank you, Louise. And I hope you have a great Christmas time as well. And to all our listeners, a great holiday period. Take the opportunity to sit back and relax. Think about what was 2025 and what you want to see in 2026. I have to agree with you. The people at Pulse are amazing with the number of articles they publish. I get up every morning. So the first thing I read is my Pulse+IT drop, which comes in about 7:30 in the morning for me. And it keeps me up to date. So there's a lot happening. There's a lot more to happen. And we, as the people involved in health technology, need to play a much more active role. And PulsePod and Pulse+IT will be the conduits to do that in the future.
Yeah, thanks, George. All right, listeners, George is going to read us out for the last episode before Christmas. Over to you, George.
Thank you all for listening to Pulse, brought to you by Pulse+IT News. Pulse is produced by Ivan Jurek of Octopod Productions. Special thanks to Emily Mara for her support. Big thanks to everyone for listening. Make sure you subscribe, follow and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, the Christmas break is a great time to catch up on episodes of PulsePod you may have missed during the year, and to visit our pulseit.news website and catch up on the news from Australia, New Zealand and Ireland. Send any feedback or topic suggestions to pulsepod@pulseit.news. We'd love to hear what's on your mind. All the best for Christmas, everyone.